soon. So a lot of games, and then I'll be working on Overwatch. That's all very early, very top secret. Do we have any gamers here? Wow, we got some gamers. I know Comic-Con has gamers. This is great. Okay, well, cool. Well, my people, thank you for coming so much. I might have a couple other band members surprise us and show up, but right now, some of them might be like recovering from their flights, and we all kind of descended on St. Louis at the last minute. And so I'm hoping that we see some faces show up, but if not, you just got me, and I'm really, really happy to be here. So maybe by way of introduction, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself, and then I will be very happy to maybe talk about anything about the video game industry in general, about music for games, about working in games, anything about games. So I started out in 1997 on the original StarCraft, on their first StarCraft. Any StarCraft players at all? StarCraft, okay. You want to play the original StarCraft? Oh, wow, okay. Very cool, okay. I started out on the original StarCraft. It was a much smaller company at the time, and basically I was working as part of the team. My wife ended up doing voices in the game. She's the Terran advisor, the one that advises you that says nuclear launch detected. That's my wife, and she's done a lot of voices for all the games in the time I've worked there. And I got to do some voices too when we were a smaller company. I did the Firebat, the Terran Firebat's me, and then I did the Arbiter for the Protoss, and I did a bunch of random things. Like the Overlord for the Zerg is me also, but it's like me combined with like a horse, and we together formed this crazy unit voice for the Overlord. And so since then, I've worked on all the games in all their series, and it's been going on now. I mean, with World of Warcraft, it's like now 10 years old. We just turned 10 years old. It's still going really strong. I can't believe it. I'm sure we have some WoW players, right? Wow, all right, fantastic. So yeah, WoW is stronger than ever, and it's now 20 years of Warcraft in general. So that's pretty awesome, and so that's amazing. So I started out, before I worked at Blizzard or in video games at all, I was writing jingles, those little musical hooks that you play on the radio that tell you about a company. That's what I was doing years ago. And then one day while I was living in Louisiana, I thought, well, you know what? I should get involved with video games. I love video games, and this would be like a great field to work in. And it's got to be easier to break into video games than, say, doing the latest blockbuster motion picture or TV show. And at that time, I think it was a bit easier, but not effortless. And now I have guys and gals and film and TV music that'll contact me and say, hey, man, how do I get involved with video games? It's like the incredible hot thing now. And so I feel really lucky to have kind of stumbled upon what's now like almost like the mainstream entertainment. Video games are huge. They're making tons of money, and the budgets have gotten bigger and bigger. And where I used to work on everything electronically, I would simulate an orchestra. Now I record with live orchestra. I mean, recently I did the score for the latest expansion to StarCraft. It's our new one called Legacy of the Void, and I worked on with an 86-piece orchestra and a full choir. And so it's like, man, we've really grown up, and it's a blast to actually be working in an industry where we get big budgets, high production value, and we've been seeing orchestras doing Pops music concerts where they program video game music. I mean, Video Games Live is a great concert series. If any of you are familiar with Video Games Live, I've been a friend of theirs for a long time. They've been doing music from Warcraft since the beginning, and I've been lucky to join Tommy Tallarico and their concert to guest conduct and just kind of be a guest of their shows here and there. I try to make it out whenever I can. So that's been really, really cool. So anyway, Critical Hit, we started a couple years ago, and it was a fun diversion for me because I work in a little cave writing music all day long, and it's great to get back into live performance again, which I used to do a long time ago. I used to be on a tour bus, and I would go around, and I was basically with a pop act, and we'd be on Club MTV, and I miss touring and playing live, and so now being able to play video game music is a real joy for me. It kind of gets me out there a little bit, and our players are all put together from a lot of people who I work with on the recording of the scores. So sometimes we'll have Lawrence Juber, who's the guitarist, who was playing with Paul McCartney and his Wings band, a phenomenal, legendary fingerstyle guitar player. And so he'll come out and he'll play with us. For our games, he's very, very much the iconic guy playing 12-string guitar in our Diablo music. That's all Lawrence Juber. And so he'll join us for some shows. He won't be here tonight because we have a rotating roster of people. They're all really successful and they're all really busy. And so we have like a family of Critical Hit musicians, and we get different people for different shows. But we've got some incredible musicians tonight as well. And you know, a lot of them are people that I've worked with in the studio. And when I approached them about doing video game music live, they were all extremely excited. Said, "Man, let's do it! I'm in." And so we have these wonderful players in this band. So it's a great thing. Anyway, so what can I answer for you guys about video games or music for games?
How long does it usually take to make music for a whole entire expansion or a whole entire game?
So for like WoW, for example. Yeah, when we're working on World of Warcraft, we'll have these kind of, there's a lot of mini expansions that are like smaller than the big, you know, we have expansions like Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, this latest one, Warlords of Draenor, and these are big expansions, and they have hours of music in them, there's tons. But before that happens, you know, as a WoW player, you'll know we do this whole patch cycle, and we're always doing music for these dot releases. So if Misstep Pandaria is known as like 5.0, you know, we'll have 5.1. I wrote a lot of music for 5.1. I wasn't busy with other projects, and so when we're getting ready for 5.1, they say, here's what we want to cover. We know we're going to have Jaina Proudmoore will be making an entrance in the storyline. We know that we'll have something really important going on with this storyline or that storyline, and then we'll map out what the plans are for what the designers are going to do. And then we'll go off, and we don't have all the information about what's going to happen yet because the designers are still working, but I'll have an idea what they're going to do in the abstract. And I'll go off and I'll write music for a couple weeks, and it's totally free form. No one's having anything to do with like exactly how long it should be or where it's going to plug in. It's a very free experience. And I might just, you know, I explored an idea for Jaina. So, well, Jaina has never gotten her own theme yet. She's one of our kind of iconic characters in the Warcraft universe. And so I said, man, she needs her own theme. You know, she's a powerful sorceress. She's like got this love relationship in the past with Arthas, but then now she's turned kind of almost mean, and you know, she's really powerful, and she's kind of got an axe to grind. And so it was great to write a theme for her. And being in that kind of several weeks period where I just write things was great. And after that period, we then go and we start figuring out, okay, what exactly is this going to be going for? And we start talking with the designers about the encounters we're going to be authoring and different specifics, and then we'll start to tailor what the music does. The whole process is maybe a couple months long from start to finish. It culminates in a recording session, we'll record live, and we'll do it with orchestra, and we'll do it with choir. And you know, it's kind of like you know, WoW has become kind of like a freight train. It just doesn't stop, and we're lucky it doesn't stop. We're so happy and thrilled that it's done as well as it has, and it's continuing. And so it's like working on another expansion for WoW, whether it's a patch release or something bigger, is like never far away. Even as I'm working on StarCraft, I'm just looking, oh look, pretty soon we'll be starting on this, and I'm going to jump on that and jump back on the train and do some more for WoW. So there are times when there's an emergency need, and they'll be like, we didn't plan on this, and this isn't being recorded in the live session because we hadn't planned on it, but we're doing this really cool thing where we're going to have something new in the Dark Moon Fair. There'll be like a merry-go-round, and we need music for the merry-go-round. And I'll say like, well, okay, and then I'll just do it all electronically. And so I got to write this cool like merry-go-round music for Dark Moon Fair, right? And they, you know, you write it in one day, and they plug it in a couple days later, and then it gets released with the PTR release, and then suddenly people are like data mining, and they hear it within a week. And so sometimes it can be a very fast turnaround. So it varies.
Also, are you working on the music for the movie coming out?
Well, no, not directly. Although Ramin is someone he's a great composer. I met him a long time ago when I was interning at Hans Zimmer's studio. I was there doing grunt work. I was serving coffee, and I was basically just, you know, I mean, I was just there to help out, and not the most glamorous job. But Ramin was there as an assistant at the time, and I met him there, and he's come up quite a bit. Worked on Prison Break, the TV series. Worked on Iron Man. And then Game of Thrones, which is kind of like, wow, it's a natural fit for Warcraft, right? So he's a great guy, and I know that we've given him several themes that he's looking at that might get woven into the fabric of the movie. And so I think I might get to be used in the movie for the music without all the stress that goes along with working under the Hollywood timelines. And we're focusing largely on the game, and I'm really excited to see how the movie comes out. Right now, I don't know for sure exactly what's going to be used in the movie, but I'm hoping that there's some thematic references. So, yeah. Hey.
Have you ever had to cut music from the final game?
Yeah, so before it makes it in, or you know, just like, oh yeah. Well, for WoW in particular, as it is today, with over 60 hours of music in the game, I could probably write something for WoW that may not go where I thought it was going to go because maybe the team changes their mind. Well, we had something in mind darker for this area, and I can always use that same music someplace else that maybe might be more what I had in mind that fits with another area. So oftentimes with WoW, even if I don't hit exactly what the team wants, usually I'm somewhere in the world of Warcraft, and so it can fit somewhere. And you know, where there's an exception to that is when it comes to the cinematics. I've done a lot of music for the animated movies at Blizzard. They do amazing work, right? One guy will spend 3 weeks just on the hair, just to make the hair look good. And so it's a great audience to write music for because they're just so wrapped up in the thing for so long, and it's a silent movie. And when you get to do music for it, they get really excited. It's also kind of stressful because they can get really specific about what they want after they've been working on this for weeks and months, and I come along and do this music and maybe not what they had in mind. And so there are times when I have to work with them and make sure that we're working together to figure out the way the music should be for the cinematic. But you know, there's been times when I've had a great experience by learning their preferences, and I've got to know them pretty well at this point. And at one time, I remember on StarCraft, I was doing music for the final cinematic. It's the Protoss Victory cinematic. And there was this scene with the ship being bombarded, you know, it's like this big showdown, and I knew that they'd probably want action. You know, they're gonna wanna feel this is an action, tense moment, but I didn't wanna do action because I thought, you know, there's this hero guy named Tassadar, he's in the ship, he's contemplating what he's gonna do about this, and he's gotta try to save his people, and he's gonna end up sacrificing himself. And I wanted to play it kind of introspective, which is a little bit of a dangerous choice for music in this movie that's a very action-paced thing. So I wrote two versions. I did like the action version, which I thought they would want, and then I wrote the thing that I thought would work really good and would be like more poignant and, you know, would kind of hopefully be more impactful. And so I went to the meeting, I played the action version that I knew they'd probably want, and sure enough, they're nodding there and say, yeah, that's kind of what we want, you know? Adrenaline, you know, it's good, you know? I said, okay, now you know that I have an idea of what you're after. Now let me show you something else. And then I showed them my more poignant version, which started with a little bit of a bang, you know, with a little bit of action moment. Then it goes into this very still, calm, in the middle of a storm moment. And since they knew that I had in mind what they were going for, they were willing to consider my other option. And we ended up going with the second take that I really was more adventurous. Not adventurous style of music, but more, a little bit more unusual. Yeah, a little more unusual, a little more pensive. And I think it made a really good ending movie, so, anyway. Yeah. Yes?
What is your favorite part of composing music for games that you've made?
My favorite part of it? Well, you know, for me, I think that some of the best moments I've had working on music for the games have been some of those cinematics. I mean, it's not the only thing. I like doing everything, but it's one of the most rewarding because these people spend so much time on it. And, you know, I'm a big fan of theater, and I really like, you know, where all these elements come together, you know, visual and sound and music and characters and storytelling. And, you know, the cinematics offer that possibility. You know, you want to go for these moments that people can just feel like they're just lifted up, you know, in the air, and they feel like massive amounts of, you know, like glory or honor, and maybe it's, you know, it's like, maybe they're sad because it's a sad scene. And so being able to like develop the arc of those moments, when it works, it can be extremely satisfying. You know, I hear back from people that have seen the scene and they know the characters and it had some kind of, or they feel moved by it emotionally. That just makes my year when that stuff happens. So that is a rewarding part. So, yeah.
For someone who wants to go into like game design and video games, what would be your advice to them?
I think to get involved in the game industry, for design specifically, I would say get involved in the mod community. So, you know, Blizzard makes these really, really great tools. You can build your own level from the ground up. I mean, you know, Dota, right, which is a very, very popular genre of game for those that aren't familiar with that. Dota was built, Defense of the Ancients was built in the Warcraft 3 engine. Someone in the fan community kind of took those authoring tools and they developed this whole new game. It wasn't a game like Warcraft 3, it was like a completely new game. And now it's become so popular, like with games like, well now our new Heroes of the Storm, but you know, League of Legends is definitely the king of the hill right now in that genre, right? We're talking like, you know, millions and millions and millions, tens of millions of people playing the game. So if you get in the mod community and you make a really cool level and whatever kind of style game you want to make, you can show that to people that are in design, like in Blizzard or anywhere else, and you can get noticed because the tools are there to make your own game right now. There's nothing stopping an enterprising designer from building something from the ground up and telling a fantastic story or making great gameplay. So I'd recommend that for sure as a way to get involved in design.
So how did you start off? Did you go to college to continue, and where'd you go?
Yeah, I went for music to University of North Texas in Denton, Texas, which is a really good music school. I mean, it's phenomenal. And I think I've gotten, I went there as a composition major with a piano concentration, but I think that most of what I've learned has been separately from school and a lot of self-study. I do a lot of score study where I'll take, music that I really like. I mean, John Williams has got all these great scores. You can buy them and you can study them and really pick them apart. And, there's a lot of ways to learn on your own as well. I benefited greatly, and I continue to study music. It's a lifelong goal. So, yes.
So thank you for finally putting a jukebox in the Garrison. That
Oh.
was great. Because now there's music. For me, I guess the music has always been what drove me in WoW. So the question I had though is, how exciting is it to get something like the ships that are now sitting in PTR, Build Your Own Navy, to get the music, to get something just completely off the wall like that?
Oh, yeah, the stuff that we're doing now that's so unusual, it's not like a typical assignment for the game, is really, really fun. I mean, I'm getting asked to do things for WoW that I would have never imagined I'd ever be asked to do for WoW. And it's really an exciting thing, right? We have all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, you have like, Brewfest and all these crazy things where we have like, saxophones in the game. What's that? What's that about? So yeah, we have some really fun, unusual things we get to do sometimes. And besides the fact that we explore all these different cultural instruments. I mean, in Pandaria it was all this Asian influence, and so we're recording with instruments that I didn't know anything about. I'm like, well, let's look up, what are the really good folk kind of Chinese instruments? Okay, what is that? It was like a harp. And once you write something for that instrument, I mean, it could be Mary Had a Little Lamb, but if you play it with an authentic player on that instrument, and it sounds like, Chinese folk music. So it makes it really easy to get, most of the way there to that kind of sound. So yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of experimentation with all kinds of crazy timbres and WoW that it's been a great experience.
So are there like musical Easter eggs and things like WoW? So like Mary Had a Little Lamb on some weird Chinese instrument?
Yeah, well, for fear of being, I get asked that, yeah, for fear of being sued, we don't play around with anything that's going to have any possibility. People were, joking around like, maybe we should just throw like, the Mario theme in there. I said, well, don't even do that because it'll come down on us really hard. We just can't get away with that, But there are things that are Easter eggs that maybe, sometimes I think only I would know about them. But people will really surprise you. I mean, I had this one motif that I did originally in StarCraft, right, for the Protoss. And the first thing I ever wrote for Blizzard was this kind of Protoss ready room music. When you're waiting for your mission, you hear this music. There's a little vamp, a string vamp. And I said, you know what? Maybe this will be the motif that actually bridges the gap between different franchises. I mean, before there was ever Heroes of the Storm, where we're mixing and mashing all these franchises, I had this idea. Let's go ahead, The games have very different soundtracks, but this one little motif, I used that Protoss Ready Room string motif in Teldrassil and WoW as one little element. But sure enough, people just immediately picked it out and I said, oh, check it out, this is the thing from there. And they're like, oh, I gotta be careful. It's like if you make an Easter egg like that, people will find it. And I guess I hope someone will find it. But
Because there's definitely zones that sound, I swear I heard it in that concert.
oh, really?
Yeah, like a couple of mountain ones and things like
It's
that.
possible because Russell, who's our audio director, writes a lot of music for the game, and Russell used to work for Disney, so it could be that he's lifting stuff off of himself.
That's fun.
Very possibly a coincidence too. Yes.
What's your favorite piece of music that you've made for the gaming industry?
Wow. Well, that's a tough one. I don't know if there's a favorite, but there's some things that have taken on a life of their own because they get used a lot, and I didn't plan it as the thing, but sometimes it's kind of evolves that way. There's a piece that, for Warcraft specifically, I wrote this piece for a trailer during Warcraft 3 called A Call to Arms, and I wrote this piece of music for a trailer, but it's got a theme to it. And then, marketing got a hold of that, and after that, they started using it for all these Warcraft promotional pieces. And then pretty soon, it became like the thing that helps to represent the sound of like adventure in Warcraft. And I love that, you know, and I love that it's taken on this little life of its own. So I wouldn't say it's like the favorite thing I've written for a game, but it's really fun that it's taken on, you know. Another thing like that happened with WoW. I wrote a theme for Arthas, you know, and when Arthas is one of our hero characters that turns to the dark side, he becomes the Lich King, for those of you that don't know Warcraft. He's a noble kind of a prince guy, and he becomes really, you know, kind of dark character. And so I wrote a theme for him when he first becomes the Lich King, and it's kind of sad. You know, it's a sad theme sung by a female solo vocalist as he's on this kind of ice, on his throne, and you're panning back, and it's kind of sad and nice, and like, oh, poor tragic character. And then later on, when we were working on Wrath of the Lich King, Neil Acre, who's another one of the composers we work with sometimes, did the music for the trailer, and he used that same theme, but he used it for the opening cinematic when you're talking about Arthas, and now, you know, his father is the voiceover talking about how he has high hopes for him, and it's, you know, very tragic, and I loved hearing the theme in that way. Then later on, Russell Brower, who's our audio director, wrote another piece of music called Invincible, which takes the same Arthas theme and then does it with a big choir as a big climactic moment, you know, dealing with the entire closure of a storyline related to Arthas and his horse, right? And so this Invincible track is really nice, and it's so cool that something that started, you know, like many years ago still is being used, and it has more meaning now because you know, the familiarity of being used in various ways now. You know, it feels like that piece of music, you know, it's taken like 10 years to write because it's a culmination of all these things, so it's kind of fun. Yes?
When and how did you first become like interested in composing music for video games or any sort of media in general?
Yes, it was games because basically I was going to school for music and I was in Louisiana wondering how in the world am I going to ever get involved writing music for media in general. I thought maybe TV or film, and I didn't know how I would do it. And then one day it was like an epiphany moment. I was just like standing outside the music building. I remember exactly when it happened. I was just like, oh my goodness, I love playing adventure games. I was playing the games from Sierra Online, and you know, that was a big company, right, with King's Quest and Space Quest. And I loved playing their games. And I said, you know what? I should get involved with that. And so I sent a couple emails out right then. One to Sierra and one to Presto Studios in San Diego, and Sierra wrote me back, and they said, hey, you know, thanks for contacting us. It was in Oakhurst, California, up in the mountains, outside of Yosemite Valley, and they said, we're looking for a musician, and so, you know, would you like to send us a demo? So I was like, son of a gun, I can't believe it. So I sent a demo in and waited weeks and weeks and weeks, and heard nothing, and I thought, well, that was fun while it lasted. I'll get a form letter at some point, or I won't. And eventually they wrote me back and they said, we received your demo. It was like a month and a half later. And they said, we received your demo, and could you send us another demo, more orchestral in nature? Because I had sent them like a big sampler with like, here's a techno thing, here's like a pop thing, here's like some orchestral music, here's all these different things. And so I said, sure. And I panicked because I had no more music to send, nothing. And so I just said, oh gosh, what am I gonna do? So I pulled a couple all-nighters at home in my home studio with my Macintosh that I bought with like student loan money, and I basically put some more music together and I sent it off, and I waited again and again. It's like every step in the process was like a month and a half at least, and I heard nothing, you know. I was just thinking like, man, this is like my one shot. I got a game company that, you know, talk to me. And a month and a half or 2 months later, they wrote back, so we received your second demo. And I said, well, yeah, you did, you know, a month and a half ago. You received your second demo, and you know, we're interested to bring you out for an interview. And so they flew me out to Oakhurst, California, and I interviewed with them. And eventually they hired me on, and that was my big break. So yeah, I felt like I won the lottery, you know. And at that time, I mean, I think I did, but you know, that was winning the lottery. Then coming to Blizzard a couple years later was like winning the Super Mega Lotto, because you know, Blizzard's such a fantastic company. I mean, at the time I didn't know how big they were. They had released Warcraft 2, which was a hit, and they had Diablo that was just being released, Diablo 1. And you know, it was still very early days for Blizzard, but they were already very successful. And I remember walking into the office of the general manager for Sierra Online, his name's Craig, and I wanted to tell him I was feeling guilty because I was talking with Blizzard. You know, I was going to maybe go interview. And I went into his office and said, Craig, man, I got to tell you, I'm going to be, I don't know what's going to happen yet. I'm just giving you an early warning. I'm going to be doing an interview with Blizzard Entertainment, and I just want to give you a heads up, you know. I hope you're not, you know, upset. He goes, Blizzard? You're interviewing for Blizzard Entertainment? Are you serious? dude, that's the most incredible thing in the world. I'm so excited. That's, you know what they do? They make these great games. And I was like, he was more excited about Blizzard than I was. I didn't even realize as much as I know now, obviously. But he was really happy for me. So yeah, eventually getting hired by Blizzard was fantastically fortunate. So, yes.
Do you play the games yourself to find out anything that maybe you can improve on in your music?
Yeah, well, I do play them, but I only play them, generally speaking, before release, which isn't the same thing as playing them for real. Certainly with WoW, it isn't. I mean, I spent a lot of time in WoW before it was released, but it was like, you know, kind of an unusual, cool opportunity to walk around in an empty world, no one else there, my own private, you know, world to walk around, and I'm gonna hear all the sounds, right? Because, you know, like our first zone that we developed was Elwyn Forest, starting area, right, for the humans. And so they had made Elwyn Forest. They gave me the initial thing was a piece of concept art. It was a beautiful picture of a forest in the morning, and it was really beautiful. And I had written music to that picture without knowing anything about playing the game. I couldn't even play the game. They're still designing it. So I wrote this music that felt like I'm basking in, you know, the warmth of a sunlit morning, you know, walking in the forest. This is what I was imagining. And they told me later on, I said, okay, Elwyn Forest, a version of it's ready if you're gonna walk around in it. And so I got to log into the game, the empty Elwyn Forest, and walk in and have the music plugged in. And I got to actually, for the first time, walk around in WoW. And for me, that was like the coolest experience. I was like, oh my gosh. Because what they made looked a lot like that concept art. It had that same feeling. It was like really beautiful lighting and the trees and the music. You know, it just felt like magical to just be in the middle of this. Wow. And so I was so happy about that. But then fast forward a little bit later on, like, you know, a year or so later, when the game is released, and I had no idea that, you know, a starting zone is not the peaceful town in the morning vibe at all. It's crazy, right? It's like everyone's fighting low-level mobs everywhere. And so, you know, what I wrote wasn't exactly perfect for the chaos of a starting zone, but, you know, if it's ever quiet, you can hear that music, you say, oh, I'm by myself in the forest. And when you're fighting things, hopefully all the combat sounds drown out the music, and so it can hopefully be fitting, so yeah. They redesigned Elwyn Forest 15 times before they finished it. But aesthetically it stayed the same, but they had to redesign the way that it played so that, you know, they could make the flow of the zone really well. So yeah, a long time to build some of the early zones for a while.
Yes. Me again, but have you ever had to remove some, have you at Blizzard have to remove something from a game because it was too dark?
Oh, too dark? Like, too, like dark, scary?
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, can I think of an example where something was a little bit too...
Intense would it be the one in the Undead Zone, I think?
He doesn't use it.
Oh, never mind.
I'll say again, sorry.
Have you ever had to remove something?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I mean, we're oftentimes having to tweak things based on, you know, the designers, what they intend and that kind of thing. I mean, you know, usually a lot of the areas that, I mean, I think that there's a few examples where we don't remove it completely. It's usually that we find something like, we do something really, really dark and say, well, let's find someplace else where this will work better. That's, you know, maybe, I know that when we're working on Duskwood, that's kind of a Sleepy Hollow vibe to that zone, right? And it always feels kind of a little bit creepy, but, you know, you want it to feel like it's dangerous, but you also want to feel like it's kind of a little bit whimsical, and it kind of looks like something out of a Tim Burton movie, right? And so we have to find the right balance. And so it wasn't like, you know, complete horror movie dark, scary, but a little bit, you know, whimsical dark. So if we have it a little bit too dark, we'll just kind of dial it back. But we usually use that music someplace else where it'll be more fitting. So yes.
I know in the video game industry, usually you work on a project, and then when that project's done, then you're out of a job. It sounds like that you have like a permanent, like 9-to-5 job.
That's what, yeah.
You actually punch in for them and you work a regular schedule?
I do, yeah, I do. I'm on staff, and it's great because I spend a little time as a freelancer.
Right.
But I don't envy the people that do that because, yeah, it's a feast or famine thing.
That's what he's kind of, you know, of course he wants to make video games, that kind of thing. I've told him, you know, I've always had a permanent job, but I couldn't imagine, you know, knowing that eventually right down the road that I'm not going to have a job and have to look for my next one. You know,
yeah.
That's...
There's some companies that have a really good way that they work, even if they don't hire staff all the time. I know that Microsoft does a lot of extended contract employment with people. And it may not be the same thing as being on staff, but yet you have these contracts that are for extended periods of time. And when you're getting done with one, you usually jump onto another. And so it can be a very semi-stable kind of a career. But no, I feel very lucky to be working as a staff person because, I mean, it's great because there's benefits. It's great because I don't, you know, if you're working as a freelance composer, and I'm sure it's this way for other areas too, it's like you're spending a lot of time, you know, loading up the cart and a lot of time pulling the cart. You know, pulling the cart is like doing the work, and loading up the cart is like getting the work. People wanting to hire you. And I don't have to even worry about loading up the cart. The cart is like always being loaded and it's always full. And I love that because I don't have to worry about finding the work. Because sometimes for me, when I was a freelancer, I would call a couple companies and it wasn't necessarily that I was lucky. People were interested in hiring me. But that, I realized, was not the end of the thing. They say, oh, we want to hire you. We want you for our game. I said, oh, great. You know, this is easier than I thought, right? And so then all of a sudden, you're saying, when do we start? And they're like, well, we're going to wait and see. We don't know quite yet. We're waiting for this pre-production period to be over, maybe in a month. And I'm like, okay, a month, that'll be fine. A month later, check in. Well, maybe another month. They're like, all right. So you wait. So 9 months later, you're still trying to find out when the game's going to, you know, when they're ready to go. And so their timing is going to be when they're ready. And it may be that, you know, they may be interested in hiring you, but they might not be ready to go for a year, which means that your cash flow situation can be really precarious.
So I get that you might have a job.
That's why I don't envy those people. Yes.
Are you, excuse me, someone's asked you this already, but are you doing any of the music for Overwatch?
Yes, but right now I'm not. I'm kind of waiting. Derek, we have different people that lead the charge on music on our games. For me right now, I'm doing StarCraft. It doesn't mean I'm doing all the StarCraft music, although I'm doing most of it, but it means that I'm responsible for finding whoever's going to help me out. So if I want to get Russell to write something or Glenn to write something or Derek, I'll hit them up and I'll help to shepherd the vision for the project. So that's been my project. Derek is the one over Overwatch, and he's telling me that pretty soon he wants to get me involved. And I'm looking forward to jumping on board because it's a really cool franchise. It's kind of superhero franchise, and I love that kind of stuff. I love like big epic superhero type music. I think I'm gonna have a great time doing it, but that should be coming pretty soon. So we'll all spend time working on almost everything. There's only a few of us that work in-house on music, right? Me, Russell, Derek, and Glenn, and we have a few trusted contractors. And so I usually end up working on everything eventually.
So is he the music director for that? You said he's working on Overwatch.
He's like the music director on Overwatch, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. That's we all take on like a music director role for each of the games as we go. So Russell right now is doing WoW. I mean, originally I was the lead composer on WoW, but Russell's dealing with all the leadership on the creative vision for WoW. And you know, this role is temporary, and we switch roles and we hand off as projects ship. But right now, yeah, Derek's the one on Overwatch. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Would you ever think you would ever have music derived your art direction?
Yeah, you know, I used to think that could never ever happen. I always thought that I'm going to have to just basically follow whatever they do and that's it. But we've seen some changes. I mean, as one of the great benefits of working there in-house as part of the development team is that we all get to trade ideas and work together. So unlike a lot of like film and TV work and other games where it's contract work and not in-house, it's such a post-production thing. It's like once they are done with everything else, they're going to get the music to come in. And I'm really glad that I'm not in that part of the process. I get to be involved from the beginning. So, you know, there's been times when I've had some influence on things that I would have never imagined I could have had. Like, remember one of the cinematics, they were basically doing something where they had a tense scene and they were still working on it. And I'll start writing music for it very early, even though all the timing is going to change. And with music, it's really difficult. You have to rewrite everything when timing changes. But it's great to start forming ideas early. And I remember at the time, I had this idea. I said, you know, wouldn't it be great if they were like, I see that they're in a room, it's kind of still, it's an important discussion. What if we had a clock ticking on the wall, and that'll help be something that can kind of make it feel a little bit more unrest and you're aware of. And they liked the idea a lot. And not only did they go for having the sound of the clock ticking, but in the footage, they actually pan over and they'll show the clock on the wall a couple times. That makes you, it's like a directing thing. And they made it kind of like, they really ran with the idea of like, oh, it's a little tension in the room. And so, yeah, I mean, it's great to have some effect on the storytelling in that way. And yeah, I mean, another fun one, which is kind of weird, is like in Diablo, I was working on one of the pieces for music. And this isn't, again, like a music thing, but it's the way the storytelling is. They had this this one kind of demon, right? And he kind of gets the best of our hero character, Marius. And at the last scene in Diablo 2, he's walking down the hallway of this kind of asylum. He's finished his work, and it's dramatic, and it's slow motion. And I had this music for the slow motion. It's like a really tough guy. The demon's walking down the thing, and it's like he's got this billowing, and it's like one of these things with I think you imagine the trench coat billowing behind him, you know, slow motion. And he's leaving the room, and he walks past Marius's like bedpan, where he was forced to like use the bathroom in the bedpan. And you know, it's like, I said, wouldn't it be cool as if he walks by, he just kicks the bedpan, and like goes flying against the wall. And they liked it, and so sure enough, they animated him kicking the bedpan as he walks out of the room. So, you know, really weird to have, you know, it's an unusual influence there, but yes, that was pretty cool.
As a music composer, do you find yourself working on the sound effects for the games quite a bit?
Back in the day, I did a lot of sound design. I've always been, my first love has always been music, but when Blizzard was a smaller company, I had to learn sound design, and I really enjoyed it because Glenn Stafford was the audio director, the only guy at Blizzard when I started. And he did music and sound design, and he's great at both. He's still there today. Right now, our sound department has over 45 people, right? Only 4 of us work on music in-house, but a lot of sound designers, a lot of producers. And Glenn would do this fantastic sound design, and he helped teach me. During StarCraft, I learned a lot about it. And I did a lot of sound design for that. I think I became good at it, but not as good as our dedicated sound designers who are phenomenal. But I also got to do a lot of directing voice actors. And you know, I kind of stumbled into that because I really love doing it. And for many years, I would direct voice actors in the studio. And it's a really cool kind of a thing to develop a skill at, you know, to work with an actor who's got their own ideas, their own talents. They need to be free to work in the way they can work. They need to help inspire without forcing too much what they do. To help inspire, and I love doing that. I miss that a lot because now we have a dedicated voice director and casting director, and I just specialize in music. But I've gotten to do a lot with other aspects of the game, you know, over the years. So cool. Yes.
So StarCraft was the first game that you really had like a lot of hold on.
Yeah.
Were you involved much in the Terran theme?
That is all the fantastic work of Glenn. Glenn is the Terran guy. Glenn was the only guy at Blizzard when we first started, and he'd written all this Terran music, and it was such an unusual, cool sound. And it's been so resilient for the franchise. It's been like this great touchstone for the franchise. He has this knack for writing for guitar, and he's not a guitarist, but he writes this great guitar music. And when they went to go make StarCraft 2, right, in 2010, they wanted to keep that flavor, and they ended up hiring some wonderful musicians. I mean, Tony Levin on bass, phenomenal bass player, and like various guitar players and drummer. But they still use some of his keyboard guitar because he had these really, it's part of the sound of the game, and they wove it into the soundtrack. But yeah, no, that's all credit to Glenn Stafford.
Yeah, it's just this, I sometimes have it on shuffle, so when I play this, I get goosebumps.
I just love his stuff too.
Yeah.
I think it's, I think his Terran music is really stood the test of time too. Yeah.
Is it fun for you to get to rework that in StarCraft?
It's wonderful, yeah. And what's cool in Critical Hit, we play some of the tunes, right? So we were playing this one Terran 1 piece from StarCraft 2 that, we're not doing it tonight. Maybe we should try to put it in the set list tonight, but it's a killer piece by Glenn. And so we play it, and it's like a rockin' tune, and it's so cool. And yeah, Glenn is leading the charge on Heroes of the Storm right now, which, I mean, you know, if you guys are familiar with Heroes of the Storm, it's a mix-up of all the Blizzard franchises, right? It's Diablo, it's StarCraft, it's Warcraft, all mixed together. A little tongue-in-cheek because you wouldn't really expect Diablo to be fighting, you know, like right, Sarah Kerrigan, right, the Queen of Blades. But it's really cool, right, for them to be doing battle together. And so he puts a lot of rock influence in there. There's a whole rock band, there's an orchestra, there's choir, it's like everything in the kitchen sink. And we do a tune from that game also, which is the Heroes Rock Opera, which is a really fun piece and great guitar work, you know, by Glenn's guitar writing. Okay.
So, were you there when they decided on the sound motifs for these 3 characters? I mean, I've definitely heard the term that Terrans are sort of space truckers. So, I think that's why his guitar theme is very country sounding.
Yeah, that's the reason, right? But the thing is, it's become a little bit, there's always been a little of that kind of, that attitude about the Terran, and a little of that kind of, that home ride rock and roll sound is part of that Terran sound. So that's definitely, yeah, it's great, you know, because as we move into the new games, we're finding ways to stretch in new directions and things, like hiring an actual like rock band to play as something new, but you have to still make sure you try to keep the same spirit of it, because I'm telling you, some of the stuff that I hear in the original StarCraft, right, even though we weren't recording with live orchestra, we did not have all live players, some of the stuff has a really cool attitude to it, and you don't want to lose that. I mean, some of the things that we sung when we didn't hire a choir, it was just me singing with Glenn. And we would sing the whole men's chorus, just he and I. Like on the original Call to Arms, it was all, the men's chorus was me and Glenn. And we would record our voices like 20 times each. And I would sing, you know, and the high parts, I have like a bass baritone voice, and I'm not a professional singer. And so for the high notes, I have to really strain to hit them. Like, it's really like, but that's part of what it sounds like. It sounds like, well, that guy's barely hanging on for dear life to hit those high notes. And it's cool, because it's intense, right? When we went to go record one of the trailers for Warcraft 3, we did it. It appeared in front of some movies, and we recorded it. I got to record with some members of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and I thought this would be the best thing in the world. When I got there, and you know what? They were great singers. But when we went to the final mix, we definitely mixed in some of Glenn and I singing our kind of bad but intense men's chorus, because it had the gravitas, it had that effect of like that intensity that we didn't quite get from the professional singers. So yeah, it's
fun.
What else? Nothing else about the video game? Oh yes.
I have it's an offshoot question. But
Perfect.
Do you feel like Epic Torn Chieftain steps on your toes sometimes?
No, I'm concerned I step on their toes sometimes. No, Epic Torn, it's so great because it's comprised of all Blizzard, right? Like the president of the company, Mike, gets to be like a rock star in this band, which is great. He's a huge fan of Rush, the band Rush, and he has been for years. And so for him to get out and play rock music with this kind of fun,
You can tell.
oh yeah, he realized. And Sammy, right, who's the art director at Blizzard, he's like the lead vocalist. And I'll tell you a quick story about that. I called up Sammy because he's like the rock singer guy. Before there's League Torn Chieftain, we go to these kind of parties, and he'd be the guy on the karaoke. He'd be doing karaoke and singing, right? And so he's such a ham, and he has a great time in that band. But I called him because I'm working on I worked on the trailer music for Heroes of the Storm, which again, talking about something I never thought I'd be asked to do at Blizzard. They wanted like metal, you know, like I'm being asked to write like, you know, rock metal music for this trailer. And so I worked on this thing, and I had an idea for a kind of a death metal vocal component, right? This really distorted thing. And so I said, I'm going to call Sammy, you know? And Sammy was involved in the game. And so I said, Sammy, you know, do you have some free time? I want you to come down to the vocal booth. I want you to try singing this death metal thing over the Heroes trailer. And he said, yeah, Jason, about that, you know, I was talking with a couple guys here, you know, me and Dustin and these guys are talking, and we heard you want to do that, and we're not sure where like a vocal's going to fit in for this trailer. They were doubting my awesome judgment about wanting to include a death metal vocal in the trailer. I don't know why they doubt me on that. And so I was like, I said, man, you gotta have some faith, man. So look, I said, I know you're busy. I'm just gonna mock it up. We'll bring it to the mix. If you like it, we'll put it in. If you don't, we won't. And so I went in our vocal booth, and I cranked up, you know, my audio, my mic, and I did the thing myself. And, you know, recorded myself. I'm not a death metal vocalist any more than I'm a choral singer. But you put it into distortion, and with enough intensity behind it, you know, it sounded like, I mean, what does it take to do death metal, right? You just have enough enthusiasm for it. And so, you know, it came out kind of cool. I brought it to the mix, and they pulled it up and said, it's kind of cool. So they ended up using it in there. So it's just a little accent. It's not a lot. It's not like a whole chorus of death metal vocals, but just a couple of accents. And, you know, I'm saying things like, you know, Heroes, Blizzard. I mean, it's just like stupid couple lines, but it adds that little edge to it, which is kind of fun. So they ended up liking my death metal vocal after all. So.
Has Critical Hit ever found its way into the soundtrack someplace?
I'm still flirting with the idea of we do a really cool rockin' version of Hearthstone, right? Hearthstone is like our new game. It's like a trading card game that's all virtual. And it's made to be very kind of lighthearted, you know? It's like tavern music. Yeah. And Peter McConnell does the majority of the music. He's a great composer, a friend of mine who's worked on Grim Fandango and Psychonauts and these great games. And so we got him to do Hearthstone. And so basically, it's a lighthearted way you're hanging out in a tavern playing a card game. But the version we do is a little more kind of like energetic, and it's a little more rock influence into Hearthstone. And so I'm trying to get them to use this music, since it's kind of it's a competitive game too. It's a fun tavern game, but it's also a good competitive type sports game. And I said we could use this track against some of our footage of sports matches and things. We were playing Hearthstone kind of in semi-professionally. And so I'm trying to get them to do it, and I've gotten interest, but we've yet to see it be imported into the game or in those official videos. But I'm hoping that we do. So yeah, I like original Hearthstone. If you come tonight to the concert, you can hear us do. We'll definitely. Well, I don't know for sure, but we could do Hearthstone. We take requests. So.
I listen to it way too often.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Your Hearthstone player?
Yeah.
Very cool.
A little addicted.
Oh yeah, it's a cool game. Very, very cool.
Did you do anything for Hearthstone?
Yes. So because of the fact that Hearthstone has this very lighthearted feel, and if you lose, you want people to feel like, oh, it's okay, try again. You know, you don't want to feel like, oh, you just got nailed. You know, you want to feel like it's all fun, right?
It feels like that anymore.
It still feels like you get nailed.
Oh, okay. You wouldn't believe the iteration I had to go through. I worked on these stingers for the game, right? When you win, when you lose. And we went through all these iterations. It's like, oh, yeah, I just did this lose thing. And it feels like you just, you know, you got nailed. And there's like, no, it just feels like it got hurt too badly. It just feels like it's too depressing. It's too much like, you know, I've lost. I'm like, well, you did lose. And that's the whole point. It's the lose stinger. And so I had to like iterate and do like, oh, it's okay, try again. So little musical moments that didn't feel too much like you're getting nailed. But the victory sounds, you know, like a celebration. So I worked on all these stingers because at the end of the day, it's still a Warcraft game. And so we really had fun weaving in some things that felt like when you cast a really powerful spell, like there's a dragon card, you can feel like, oh, I just cast, you know, with real physical cards, you don't have a little score to tell you, you know, this little musical stinger that says, oh, you know, with the animation and the effects. And it's really cool because it reminds you you're still playing a game where you can wield these really powerful cards. So I worked on a lot of legendary card stingers, and I worked on the original trailer music for the game too. But Peter's the guy mainly responsible for the whole score, and it's a great lighthearted taverny thing, so it's great.
I was gonna ask, have you played for BlizzCon?
Yes, our first concert we ever did as Critical Hit was at BlizzCon. So it was like a couple years ago. We were at BlizzCon. We were at the show, and we got to do a number of you know, Blizzard selections, and it was really cool. And I'm looking forward to hopefully going back to BlizzCon because, wow, what better audience, you know, than Blizzard. Is so great. But I say that, but it's the same thing for Comic-Con. I mean, Comic-Con has been the most amazing thing. I mean, you know, there's a lot of really passionate people in the community that come to Comic-Con, and you know, a lot of gamers. So yeah, I'm hoping that anyone who's like, you know, we've had people burst out in a song while we play Pokemon, right? Because they know the song, which is a real thrill, right? It's like, so yeah, it's good stuff. Yeah. Want to be the very best. It's good stuff, man. You have to come and sing. I'll give you the mic. You can sing with us. So. Yeah.
So, what are the odds that we'll get some kind of rendition of One-Winged Angel tonight?
We have a version of One-Winged Angel. Really cool version of it. But we're not doing it tonight. The thing is, it's very intense. And the thing about it is, one of our players has not had that piece, and it would be very difficult to just all of a sudden get it. It's not something that you can do easily. It's a very complicated piece, and we do a very complicated version of that piece. But yes, it's killer. Yeah.
Jesse, we just tried to sing it a while ago.
What?
The concert, the Final Fantasy concert was last Saturday.
Oh, I heard that.
Yeah, they let people sing along with One-Winged Angel.
Oh yeah.
They told people there was only the one word, Sephiroth.
Sephiroth.
No, there's several lines of Latin.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. I mean, we got to do a show like Critical Hit. We did a show earlier this year in Orlando at the so-called Orlando Nerd Fest, which was an awesome event. And Nobuo Uematsu was there with his band, the Earthbound Papas. And so we got to double headline together. And it was so cool because I'm a big fan, right? Big fan of his. And so hanging out by the pool with Uematsu and his band, I mean, we, you know, love his music and stuff. And so we're doing a little Final Fantasy music tonight. So yeah, that'll be really fun. So yeah, I would like to come to the concert. There's a great music in that catalog. So all right. Anyone else? Are we at time? What time is it right now? 2:20. What time did we start?
1:30.
Oh, that's about it. Okay. All right. So yeah. So tonight it'll be 6 o'clock, right before the costume contest. You come early, you're gonna get a great seat for the costume contest. It should be a really fun show. So if you guys can make it tonight, And yeah, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it.